On the desk tonight, Dan Nathan, Guy Adami, Tim Seymour, and guest trader Cameron Dawson. Nice to be back, guys. Thank you for having me.
CQ, before we get started, the show's going to be, if we make it to January, it's 17 years. And if, let's say, another 17 years, people will say that the week of August 21st was Mount Rushmore week. We had Tyler Matheson. He's on, and you are on the CNBC Mount Rushmore. No, it's true.
That's the reason I come in is to get this.
Well, you got it.
Let's start with Nvidia. All-time high after blowing the doors off. The stock did surrender into the close, up a dime, taking semis in the broader market with it. AMD, Intel, SMH all falling. Dow and S&P down more than 1%. NASDAQ leads the losses, down nearly 2%. So, is Nvidia's 24-hour turnaround a worrisome sign? Dan, what do you think?
Well, listen, I think it could be for the tech trade that has been so wrapped up in all the excitement about AI, right? And so we really saw it crescendo, I think, over the last month and a half or so. We've talked a lot about July 18th when Microsoft put out this press release about the pricing of their Copilot, their AI tools. The stock rallied 5% in a straight line in a couple of hours. We were doing the math on just the market capitalization that it gained, $130 billion. We're like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And that reversed lower. It took a lot of the mega caps into Q2 earnings with it. And we were really waiting to see how investors would react to something that we all knew was going to be a blowout. And when you think about Nvidia and you think about the sorts of growth rates they're going to be able to put up from here on out, they look much less than they did in late May, than they're going to look today, that sort of thing. And that's what investors start pricing this. And we talked about this early in the week. So who is the incremental buyer of a story that we know is really great right now, but competition is going to be coming online? We don't know if demand is going to stay at this sort of pace. So I just go back to on August 14th, this stock traded $400. This morning, it traded $500. You do that math, guy, you can do that math on $1.1 trillion market cap. You think about it. It's $250 billion just on the anticipation of that. So there was just no one left to buy it here, Carl.
What do you think? I mean, if this action comes after their quarter, I would not have liked to have seen a miss.
No. And you certainly think it's going to set us up for some kind of digestion. I think that's the best case scenario here. We've moved so far so fast. And then it's a question, to your point, Dan, if you start to see a more material slowdown in sales. There is no evidence of that yet because there is no clear competitor yet for them. But I think that's more of a 2024 story. So it sets you up, you digest for a little bit, you grow into this very, very rich multiple for a bit. Maybe you get another leg higher after that digestion if they can hold on to the sales pace. Otherwise, it looks more like a top.
Tim, what did you make of, we made fun of Rosenblatt Street High 1100 today, arguing that it's cheaper today than it was yesterday. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but I think there's plenty of people that can argue that it's hardly cheap and that the growth rates that we have in here are not the growth rates. I think this may be what Dan was saying, are not sustainable. But I'd prefer to assess Nvidia from a market context, which is that on the Q1 numbers, the outperformance to the S&P and the relative highs it took the semiconductors to against the S&P immediately, and highs that it's had that semi SOX index, whatever you're looking at, SMH, has been unable to surpass. And in fact, the reaction last night was completely the opposite, or really today's trading. So the semis underperformed the S&P by about 2.5%. You saw a straight line down, essentially 5% on the SMH. And that's telling in terms of market leadership. Now, we're coming out of a period where after the last 3 to 4 weeks going into Nvidia, I think there's already been a lot of repositioning by equity investors, both in terms of what's been going on with the rates markets and where they have been with the stock market. I think there's so many more people investing in equal weight ETFs versus market weight. We've seen a significant move into cash. We get the money market data. So was Nvidia's result and this result, I think we've all indicated that this was kind of what was expected, and that I would make an argument that it was a pretty solid market response when you consider it. But most importantly, the market's not going to trade higher without leadership from mega cap tech and semiconductors. And I think this kind of crowned that for the short run, even though I think Jackson Hole actually gives markets some room to rally after some really bad price action in the last week.
We'll talk Jackson Hole in a moment. Guy, I'm curious to know whether or not you think, does this allow you to graduate into some banks here, or what is?
Banks trade awful. So let's just drill down quickly on Nvidia and SMH. So 112 million shares are traded today. It typically trades about 50 million. We can do that math as well. 2 times normal volume on a day where it opened on the highs, all-time high, and closed effectively on the low of the day. That's not particularly good price action. SMH, which Tim just mentioned, You have a massive double top going back to December 2021, traded up to 160 and failed, traded up to 160 again, seemingly failing now. AMD had a horrible day. The rest of the semis did as well. It's not an indictment of Nvidia. It's an indictment of the valuation. And yes, you can make an argument that maybe it's marginally less expensive than it was the day before, but it's still expensive, and the market traded that way. And now you have to ask yourself, who's the incremental buyer? In terms of where there's rotation, I don't know. Banks don't trade particularly well. The yield curve suggests banks aren't going to get a whole lot better anytime soon. And again, if yields start go markedly higher from 4.25 to where I think they're going, that's not particularly bullish.